If you were a Trump supporter on DC and you showed up to the Capitol an hour and a half or 2 hours after the riots, they're arresting these people. They didn't fight anybody. They didn't break anything. They did not trespass. And these people are going to jail. If you're Owen Schroyer and you were at a permitted rally, you got a permit for it, but you yelled something like death to tyrants, you're going to prison because you're all Trump supporters. And then what you get is the left-wing media, the leftist media, will absolutely lie about everything that happened for the benefit of making money for their companies.
I will tell you that I have had conversations with some of my MSM colleagues who have, of course, off the record, conceded that some of those accidental tourists, accidental trespassers, just didn't know the DC law and didn't understand DC. And they would concede that, they probably got to the door, they saw the line of people coming in, and they probably thought it was all right. We here in DC, though, of course, we know how uptight it is, and we probably, a local resident probably
I completely disagree.
That's what they tell me.
We have seen over and over again protesters storm DC buildings. There are protests in DC every week.
Are they bussed in?
Protesters?
The ones that are storming, are those the ones that
sometimes,
are
yes,
in?
absolutely. Yeah. Left-wing organizations will get charters. Activists will show up in DC, and they'll enter these buildings and shut them down.
Yeah, Kavanaugh hearing.
Yeah,
I mean, Kavanaugh hearing is one example, but we had a recent example. A bunch of far leftists were protesting Israel,
right?
Yeah,
and shutting things down in DC in these buildings.
Yep.
During Occupy Wall Street, occupiers showed up in DC. Everybody entered these buildings, and there were thousands of people I shouldn't say storming, but marching through the halls, chanting, knocking on doors, looking for members of Congress. Totally fine, totally A-okay. So when you have historic precedents and legal precedents that protesters do enter these buildings and are never criminally charged, what we see now with J6 is it's plainly obvious to anybody. It's a farce. It's a lie. To the guys who are fighting cops, lock them up. 20 years seems a little excessive, if you ask me. A few months. But you look at Antifa during Trump's inauguration, when they marched around the city, smashing windows and setting fires. Not only were these people they were arrested, they were released, their charges were dropped, and then the city paid them millions.
And more importantly, by comparison to that particular situation after Trump's inauguration, was that the Department of Justice tried to prosecute these cases. They were getting hung juries and acquittals in court. And so they went, screw it. And they just dismissed the rest of them. And of course, that is because of the D.C. makeup of a jury. I mean, when you're talking about 92.5% of the jurors or the jury pool, they're voted for Biden anyway. It's a fait accompli before your jury selection ever even happens. It's not going to go your way. And of course, what the Department of Justice has done, and what every judge that is inside on this colluding in this cartel that they have developed, or what I call a star chamber, is they have decided that there's not going to be a change of venue motion granted to anyone, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the polling, regardless of the data, the actual evidence, that you cannot get a fair trial there. It's 99.75% conviction rate right now on January 6th trials. 95.75. If you just take Department of federal law in D.C., it's just over 60% of the cases they win. It's because it's political. If you take the average of just over 60% compared to 99.75, you can't help, if you're an honest broker whatsoever, except to conclude that this is a political problem.
Why hasn't Donald Trump filed a lawsuit against E. Jean Carroll in West Virginia?
Well, obviously he should, but...
My question is, we watch this stuff happen over and over and over again. In New York to Donald Trump, where are the Republicans to literally file the same suits? Where are the prosecutors in these Republican states to file charges against these political organizations? They're just not doing anything.
All of the attorneys that I work with right now, they all say the exact same thing. If every single one of these January 6th defendants had been tried in their home district before a jury of their peers, that it would have been a 50-50 proposition in terms of conviction versus acquittals. And so you have to get outside of the Beltway. in order to get a fair trial there. And that's honestly, this is my fight. If I have to go there, it's not going to be like J.D. Rivera's fight. It's not going to be like Stephen Horn's fight. I have the advantage of having watched from the bench in their trial. I have the advantage of watching how they treated the Oath Keepers. But
are you going to go for a bench?
If I had to choose for it, it would be a bench trial. Absolutely, I wouldn't do a jury trial.
The risk there is that the judges are corrupt too.
Well, you have,
but at least you know the jurors are corrupt. Maybe you'll get lucky and get McFadden.
Right. Or you get them at a time, like, for instance, we now know that in chambers that these judges are talking about this 1512 obstruction of official proceeding trial, a charge that SCOTUS has agreed to take up. We know that in chambers they're saying, oh yeah, SCOTUS is going to scrap this thing.
Yep.
Which is going to send the entire J6 routine into complete chaos.
I mean, people are going to get their charges rescinded, or how's that going to work?
That's what they've got to figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean,
because I imagine on appeals it would change the law.
The obstructing official proceeding.
Right.
The challenge to it is it was a literal reference to destruction of documents, not marching through a building which bothered someone.
Correct. That's exactly it.
So SCOTUS is going to rule and probably say, yeah, the law was made for this reason, not for protesters who might show up at some point.
It's already creating chaos because individuals who have already had that charge on them for maybe their charging documents were executed a year or 2 years ago, and they're just now getting to trial. Obviously, their motions are being made by their defense attorneys. No, we need to delay the trial until this is decided by SCOTUS, and the judges are granting that. And then additionally, some of the judges have let people out of prison because the only reason they were in prison was because of the 1512.
So some people have already been released?
Yes, they've actually already released some of them. They've sent them home conditionally until this thing is settled.
Wow.
So it's already creating problems. As I said, the re-ups sentencing sent shockwaves through. I mean, I don't know how going forward that they can sentence a misdemeanor defendant now to prison time after what.
Have you said what you think they'll charge you with?
They won't tell me, as I mentioned before. In my first interview with the FBI, they said, "Look, it's not our place to decide. We're just going to turn this information over to the DOJ. If they decide to charge you, it's probably going to be just the 4 basic misdemeanors." But when they did notify me that I was going to be charged in November of 21, one of the charges that they were going to hit me with was interstate racketeering.
What?
I'll just let that marinate for a moment.
Well, what does that?
Because I had licensed and made money off of the sale of my videos.
So they're admitting you're a journalist.
Right. Exactly.